B'shut Amar Atra, B'shut Rabbanim HaChashuvim. First of all, a number of thank yous before I have the sacred task of introducing our beloved teacher, Rabbi Weinreb. First of all, thank you to Rav Sobel, to the entire Kilat Shara Yona Menachem Kihila for opening your doors once again to us for this beautiful event and for partnering with us in bringing the Torah of the Orthodox Union to Modi'in. I want to thank our dear friends, the Fun family, who have partnered with us in creating this entire series of community Torah summits, creating these beautiful events that are now being replicated in communities throughout Israel. And we thank them for dedicating this evening and all these programs for the continued merits of the Aliyat Neshama for their beloved parents, David and Norma Fund, Zichronam Livracha. I want to particularly thank and acknowledge our OUisrael president, Tzvi, who's here with us this evening, who really gives us, every single one of us, so much confidence and empowers us to bring what we can, to put our hearts and soul into everything we do to inspire the Jewish people. And we learn from your examples, Tzvi, so thank you for being here with us. I also want to thank, as it was already mentioned, Daniela Hallerstein, who is on our Israel board and was instrumental in bringing us here to Modi'in. We thank you, Danielle, for all your hard work. I also want to thank my dear colleague and friend, Rabbi David Fine, who you already heard from, and Rabbi Stephen Ettinger, who have also worked diligently to help bring these programs and the Torah of the OU to Modi'in. So we thank you for your friendship and for all your assistance. Acharon Chaviv, I must take a minute of personal privilege and thank my incredible OU Israel colleagues. So many of you are here this evening and have put your heart and soul into, as you always do, put your heart and soul into bringing Torah to communities across Israel, and it's a schus to work with every single one of you. Just 1 year ago, less than a year ago really, many of us gathered here in this very same Beit Knesset for an evening of inspiration, and we were energized and left here flying, ready for Yom Kippur, and excited for the year ahead. So much has changed over these past many months. The world has been turned upside down. But if there's one thing we've learned throughout this experience is the incredible koach and capacity that Am Yisrael has to comfort one another. Rav Kook, as a matter of fact, when Rav Kook in his magnum opus, Orot Teshuva, he writes that one of the essential messages of these days of Teshuva is the capacity not only to transform ourselves, but to heal one another through that transformation. This evening, I have the incredible honor to introduce our keynote speaker. If there's anyone who is properly suited to guide us in the process of transformation and healing, it's Moreno Rabbeinu, Rabbi Dr. Hersh Weinreb. Rabbi Weinreb's biography, and I get in trouble every time I try to introduce him, and he always gets upset at me that the accolades I throw his way. Rabbi Weinreb, of course, is the beloved Executive Vice President Emeritus of the Orthodox Union, and he continues to be an incredible gift to us as OU professionals in terms of his sage advice, his inspirational teaching, and of course, he's also renowned for his many, many written works and prolific speaking engagements. But it's an honor for me and a schus for us all to introduce and welcome Moreno Rabbeinu, Rabbi Dr. Hersh Weinreb. Was it okay this year?
Thank you, Rabbi Shor. It wasn't too bad this time. There's a story told of a chassid who came to his Rabbi, his Hasidic Rabbi, at this time of year, and he was feeling kind of down. After all, he knew that in many ways in this year he hadn't acted properly, at least several times. He was kind of entering into the season depressed. So he came to the Rebbe for some advice. So the Rebbe took out a Sefer Tehillim and turned to Kapitel Kuf Gimel, chapter 103, Pasuk Yud Beis. And he says, what do you think this Pasuk means? Kirchok Mizrach Mima'arov, Hirchik Mimenu Es Pisho'enu. As far as distant as east is from west, so has God distance from us our sins. What do you make of this pasuk? What does it mean to you? East to west? So the Chassid says, oh, Rabbi, you made me more depressed because now I think that the distance between me and proper Teshuva, proper self-improvement, self-transformation, is as distant as the Far East to the Far West, as distant as it is from Mongolia to San Francisco. I can't, how can I do Teshuva? It's so far away from east to west. So the Rebbe answered him, no, you don't understand. You know how far it is from east to west? It's in Yiddish, he would say, ein klein dreh, one little turn. You're standing facing the east, the west, that's it. It's not far at all. But remember, when you're changing and just turning a little bit, just from 180 degrees, you're changing directions. That's what Teshuva is all about, changing your direction in life. It's no small matter. It's an easy thing to do. You just turn around, that's it. But by doing so, you can be facing the Oren Kodesh and then facing the Wild West, or you can be facing the Wild West and facing the Oren Kodesh. There's a huge difference between the two, but it's really a transformation that doesn't take much effort on your part. Now, this story for me kind of encapsulates the title of this particular talk, which I've given in various Gilgulim. Is Teshuva improvement, doing better, or is Teshuva transformation? Is Teshuva personal change, becoming a different person? So I'd like to share with you several opinions on both sides of the coin. And I'll begin with a passage in the writings, and there are very few writings from this very great teacher of Musar, the founder of the Musar movement, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter lived in the middle to late 19th century, and he created a movement, the movement of studying Musar works and living in a certain highly ethical world, and also in being able to emphasize bein adam lachaveru, getting along with other people. There's a lot to be said about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, and for whatever reason, he didn't leave us many writings. But some of his brief writings are collected in a sefer. It was put together by one of his Talmidim, of Yitzchak Blazer, and it's called OUisrael. And in this sefer, OUisrael, it's translated by many people into English and other languages. In letter number 6, he writes as follows. The pasuk reads, and this is a pasuk that many of the basic texts of Musar stress. The pasuk reads, Im tivaksheno kakesef. If you search for it as you would search for silver. Uchematmonim techapseno. And if you search for it like you would search for a hidden treasure. Oz toven yiras Hashem. Yiras Hashem, fear of God, the height of spirituality. You have to look for it. So he understands this pasuk to mean, he asks us to imagine. He's very much into dimyon, into imagine things. Imagine that you're a poor person and you have a small little business and you're just scraping by, from month to month. And at the end of every month, you look at your accounts and you see just how much money, how much profit you made the past month. And then in 1 month you see, well, this month I did a little bit worse than the previous several months. So something's wrong. I've got to fix it. So what the person does is whatever he can, some small thing. He puts an ad in Torah Tidbits. Maybe he'll get more customers. Just some small thing. Or suppose you wake up one morning and you're not feeling well. Not feeling well, you have a headache, kind of sore throat, etc. You don't go running right away to get a CAT scan or MRI. You take a couple of aspirins, and drink some hot tea or chicken soup. Because that's all you need, it's a small thing. It's only a cold. So you do some small thing. So you're right, this is the same thing with Teshuva. You just got to do a very small thing. A little turn. And he puts it this way. Ein makom leyeush lifnei ha'adam. A person shouldn't despair. At this time of year, when we think of how we should be better, sometimes we just feel a sense of defeatism. How can I really change? After all, let's be honest with myself. I'm not able to really do this, do that. Im yasim libo v'nafsho l'hashkiach b'hanhogas sorchei haguf. If you reflect upon your physical needs, your medical needs, your income, so whatever's not quite right, you do small things to change it. You don't change careers in mid-course without much thought. You do some small things to just make things better. You don't rush to the best specialist in gastroenterology if you have a bellyache. You take some medicine, appropriate medicine, and that usually works. Small things. The same thing is true with Teshuva. This approach of self-improvement, small steps, is echoed again and again, or is actually preceded again and again, by a man who lived a generation, or really 2 generations before OUisrael Salanter, and that was the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon, Hagra Gaon Rabbi Eliyahu, in his commentary on Mishlei, has a trend in all of his comments. I would say he does this about 6 or 7 times in his commentary on the whole Sefer of Mishlei, of Proverbs. And I'll just for the sake of time, just mention one quote. He writes in Sefer Mishlei, Adam tzorich leilech b'darko la'at la'at. You gotta go slow in life. Midarga ledarga, from step to step. V'imhu kofetz, suppose a person jumps. V'notel darga gavoa. There's a ladder, stairwell, and he jumps from the floor to the 10th step. Gavoa yoser mehoroilo. He bit off more than he can chew. V'nofel mimeno. He's likely to fall. And then when he falls, he's really going to give up. I tried to do tshuva. I dumped double up to the 10th step, and I fell down. Forget about it. I'm not doing tshuva anymore. V'notel liatzmo derech acheres. You decide, enough of this trying to get better. It's too hard. So don't do 10 steps at a time. Do 1 step at a time. Settle in on step 1. See how it works. And try step 2. It's to be done slowly. Again, the emphasis is upon small steps, improvement. Do a little bit better. And there are many others who take that point of view. There's one person, and this is a person who's very hard to argue with, especially with the power of his pen, and that is Rambam. The Rambam has a lot to say about tshuva. One of the things he says is as follows. Listen carefully to how the Rambam understands tshuva. Compared to Yisrael Salanta, the Vilna Gaon, small steps, take it easy. Don't get frightened by the Rambam's prescription for what tshuva involves. Midarchei HaTshuva. This is Hilchos Tshuva in the Rambam, in Mishnah Torah, Perek Beis, Halacha Daled. Midarchei HaTshuva. Darchei HaTshuva doesn't just mean the act of tshuva. The act of tshuva, for the Rambam at least, is vidui, to confess to God, I'm no longer going to do X, Y, Z, won't do it again, I'm going to try my best, I regret what I've done, I look forward to a better future. That's the essence of tshuva. But then there's something more than that. Darchei HaTshuva. The personality that you have to become if you're really going to do tshuva. Lios hashov tzoek tamid lifnei Hashem b'fchiyu v'sachanunim. Number one, it's to cry out to God with tears and with begging, with entreaties, asking God, tachanunim, pleading with God. It's a type of tefillah that sometimes we get into the mood of doing. Unfortunately, we've had plenty of occasions in past months to pray to God tzoek, with a loud voice of protest and woe and trouble and hope, all mixed together, bivchi uvetachanunim, with tears and with begging God. Number one, v'yoseh tzedakah kafi kocho, and to do as much tzedakah as possible. Tzedakah means writing checks and putting money in a pushka, but tzedakah also means smiling at people, greeting them b'sever panim yafot. Tzedakah means a lot more than just charity in the narrow sense of the term. Tzedakah kafi kocho. We all have more koach than we think to perform tzedakah. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. It has to be personal relationships, greeting people, complimenting people, making people feel better, giving people good ideas, etc. Umisrachek harbe min hadover shechoto bo. And distance oneself far from whatever sin you were doing. Whatever the sin was, if it was not being careful enough about kashrut, so be careful to avoid any questions about kashrut. Do better there. If your sins involve malicious gossip, try to stay away from company that encourages malicious gossip. Misrachek harbe min hadover shechoto bo. Distance yourself. And then, umishane shemo, change your name. Koloma, as if to say, and here's the key words, ani acher, I am now a different person. I'm not just someone who's climbed one step up the ladder. I'm walking up a different ladder. I'm somewhere else. I'm a different person. It's total change. Ani acher, writes the Rambam, I am another person, a different person. I'm no longer the person I was yesterday or last year or last month who's done A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. I'm no longer that person anymore. You change everything you do for the better. Of course, you stop doing whatever sins you were guilty of, but you're also doing a lot of other things better. You're taking care of yourself physically better. You're taking care of your health. You're more sensitive to your wife, your husband, your children, your parents, whatever it happens to be. So it's a generalization. You're not just walking up the steps of a ladder. You're changing everything about you. Of course, these are ideals. And they're powerful ideals. But this is the Rambam's way of saying that it's not about improvement in the sense of doing something definite, something specific better. That's, of course, not to be dismissed, but it means something much more total, much more all-encompassing. It means transformation, becoming a different person. And that's what the Rambam wants for the person who wants to follow the darchei hatshuva, the ways of tshuva, not just the basic doing tshuva, shamnu, vagadnu, gazalnu. It's more than that. It's a whole change of personality, change of character. To jump forward about, I guess, 800, 900 years to another person who's written about this, who did not die very long ago. Many of us have read his works. They're written in English. Pesach Shron has a series of books about him, calls him the preacher or the Magid of Yerushalayim. That was Rav Shalom Shvadron, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, who lived in Shari Chesed in Yerushalayim and died some years ago. And he wrote a precious little sefer on this whole topic. It's a long sefer, an interesting one. It's one of the best sellers in the stores, at least in Yerushalayim. This title of the book is Kol Dodi, and it's all about this time of year, Elul and the Yomim Noroim. And he writes as follows. There are those of us who have gone through, he's addressing, let's say, a yeshiva or a seminary, and saying, all Elul, you've been doing all kinds of things. You're doing better. You're waking up early for slichos. You're listening to the shofar. You're saying, L'Dovid Hashem Ori. And you're considering various ways, and you can do better. Very nice. But all of that, God still demands more of you. More of what you've been doing all the past 20, 21 days of Elul. He wants something more of you. All the chizuk, all the improvement that you've been going through, and you've been serious about it. It's all chashuv. It's all very important. Avol adayin kayemet hateviyah, but still it's a demand upon you, the demand upon you from the Ribono Shel Olam, lehishtanot, to change. You're doing a lot of things differently, wonderful, but we're looking for something more. I heard Rabbi Shvadron many times speak, and he often would speak in Yiddish and often speak in Ivrit. When he spoke in Yiddish, he would say, Teshuva is nicht besser zu werden. Es ist anders zu werden. Teshuva is not to become better, it's to become different. The hishtanot. And he says in just one powerful sentence, lo dai, it's not enough. Biksat hishtaprut kan. With a little bit of improvement here, the kitchen is a mess. Okay, I'll take that stain off the wall with a swipe of the brush. That's hishtaprut. That's an improvement. B'ma'at hishtaprut sham, a little improvement here, a little improvement there. Adarabah. Elu shekein margishim, elu shekein osim. Person who's doing this hishtapruyot, she are doing these improvements, these small improvements, little patches that are being repaired. That person itself, there's more demanded of him or her. There's more than that demanded. If you have enough inspiration inside of you to begin to paint the stains on the wall of the kitchen, then you have the power and the ability to redo the whole kitchen. And that's what the Ribono Shel Olam wants from us. God wants more. God is kind of demanding. You can do it. If you could do this little bit, if you can do one step at a time, 2 steps at a time, well, you can change, you can accelerate and do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and be on the 10th rung in seconds. This is the attitude, Rambam, I'm a different person now. And for Rav Shvadron, this is what God demands of us in this time of year. So how does a person change? It's not so easy, obviously. Change in a transformational sense. Rambam gives us an example, a fascinating example, in his commentary on Pirkei Avot. Rambam's first work, which he wrote as a teenager in Arabic, was his commentary on Mishnayos. The Pirush HaMishnayos, his commentary on the entire Mishnayos, was written by the Rambam as a youngster, truly a teenager, and as I said, in the language of the Muslim environment in which he grew up and in which he lived. And he comments on this passage. It's a statement of Rabbi Akiva toward the end of the 3rd parak of Pirkei Avos. Hakol tzafui v'harshus nesuna, uvetuv ha'olam nidon, both important topics about the future, about knowing the future, about etc. But then he says, and this is the topic for tonight, v'hakol lefi rov ha'maaseh, avalo al pi ha'maaseh. It's not what you do, it's how many times you do it. That's how he interprets it. It's a unique interpretation. Hakol lefi rov hamasa. It all depends upon how much you work, how hard you work. Avalo al pi hamasa. It doesn't make a difference what your work is. Your work could be a brain surgeon, or your work can be a sanitation department wiping up the streets. It depends on not so much how you do it, but how many times you do it, how much energy you put into it, etc. And the Rambam uses as an example, a fascinating example. I think we all come upon this in our own tzedakah giving. Everyone here, I have no doubt about it, gives tzedakah, and gives it probably more than you can afford, especially in these times of year, this year that we're going through right now. We've all given a lot of tzedakah in many ways. But the Rambam writes, this is the Hebrew translation of the Rambam by Rav Shilat of the Yeshiva Bal Adumim, and he translates it as follows. Achakach, by the way, Rambam says here, he starts off his explanation. I'm about to explain this Mishnah because only Rabbi Akiva could have said this Mishnah. You needed a really, really special person to say this. And it's Rabbi Akiva to say that. That's what the Rambam writes here. And he goes on to say, suppose I have $1,000, my discretionary fund, and I want my own personal discretionary fund, and I want to give it to tzedakah. So I could write a check for $1,000 and put it in the mail to some good cause or some needy family, and I've done a wonderful mitzvah. But I can also do something else. I can go to the bank, check in the $1,000 for 1,000 single dollar bills, and go and distribute $1 to 1,000 needy people or needy causes. What's the better thing to do? So as far as the basics of the mitzvah, what's the difference? I gave tzedakah to a good cause, a worthy cause, $1,000. What's the difference if I give it all in one place or distribute it to 1,000 different needy causes? So the Rambam says, it depends what you want to do. Do you want to follow the path of self-improvement? Good. You get credit for a $1,000 mitzvah. But if you want to change your whole attitude toward charity, if you want to meet 1,000 needy people and get a smile from each and one of them and a thank you, and relate personally to 1,000 different people, giving them each $1, that's not just a mitzvah of giving $1,000. That causes you to have a kinyan, which Rabbi Shilat, who's the translator here, says that the Arabic word for kinyan, which was in the original text of the Rambam when he wrote it in Arabic, kinyan doesn't mean to acquire. Kinyan means kinyan nafshi, a soul kinyan, S-O-U-L. It's a kinyan in your soul. There's not a kinyan in your bank account or even in your credit account of good deeds. It's a kinyan nafshi. It's tichuna. It becomes a characteristic of the person. If you give a one-shot deal or put a check in the mail, it's not going to change your character. Wonderful person, very generous, fine. But if you do about 1,000 different causes and make sure each one of it is deserving and give it in the proper way. Sometimes it's not proper to give it directly to a poor person because you embarrass the poor person. That's a whole other subject in the Rambam. But nevertheless, it's going to change you. It's going to change your tichuna. It's going to change your character. This is the Rambam's approach. So we have two approaches. These two approaches, among the Gedolei Yisrael over the generations, we went over a lot of generations here, to the 20th century, Rav Shvadron, the 21st century he lived, and going all the way back, in this case, to the Rambam himself. In the history of psychology, there have been many, many methodologies invented to this very day of how do you do psychotherapy. Psychotherapy means a person comes to you with some type of behavioral problem and wants to change. So there are two approaches, two broad approaches, and under each approach there are countless sub-approaches. One approach is what in general used to be called in my days in graduate school, behavior modification. Meaning the person comes to you, a client, and he complains about whatever he or she is bothered by. What you do is you isolate a behavior or two that the person is doing. Oversleeping. Okay, so tomorrow morning, set the alarm clock for 5 minutes earlier than you usually wake up, or even for 2 minutes earlier. Slow. Go slow. It's following Yisrael Salanta, one step at a time, not 5 steps up the ladder, one step up at a time. And slowly you modify the behavior until 1 minute becomes 2 minutes, and 2 minutes becomes 10 minutes, and pretty soon the person was waking up at dawn and, going to the early minyan, or to learn Daf Yomi, or whatever. That's a behavior modification thing. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying it, but it's all about improvement. But then there's an entirely different school of thought, usually traced back to the psychoanalytic movement, and that is transformation. What we're really trying to do is make a change in the character structure of the person. It's not a matter of moving the clock back 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then you're an early riser. It's changing your entire attitude to a life, your emotions, your moods, your preferences, the songs you sing, the books you read, etc. It's depth. It's something deep. So we have behavior modification versus what used to be called depth, not death, chas v'sholem, D-A-T-H, but depth, D-E-P-T-H, depth psychology. Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal was very, very aware of depth psychology. The truth is, at this time of year, and certainly during Aseret Yemei Teshuva beginning next week, we all should be kind of reverberating to the term depth. Because we say Shir HaMalos, usually OUisrael has chosen 2 Kapitlach Tehillim, Kuf Chaf Aleph, Esoein Hayal Horim, and Kuf Lamed, 130, Shir HaMalos, Mima'amakim Kerasicha Hashem. God, I call upon you from the depths. So Soloveitchik, in various of his writings, collected writings, but the origin of this in a sefer called TORAH, the wonderful things that Rav Soloveitchik said. So he focuses on the fact that it's customary to recite the chapter, Shir HaMalos Mima'amakim Kerasicha Hashem. God, I call upon you from the depths. Now, immediately, just that phrase, depths, is a powerful word. I'm not calling upon you from something superficial, I'm calling upon you something from the depths of my soul, from deep inside of me. But he says, notice, it doesn't say I'm calling upon you from something deep inside of me. It's in the plural, ma'amakim, the depths in the plural. Rav Soloveitchik quotes a Zohar, which is a little unusual for him to do, but he says that the Zohar writes that there exists 10 ma'amakim in each of us. We each have a depth, and below that depth there's another depth, and deeper down is still deeper, and deeper till there are 10 depths. 10 depths of despair, and 10 depths of spiritual power. I call it 10 negative depths. There's 10 aspects of ourselves that pull us down and tell us, you can never do it, that make us despair. And the Rav here, Mordei Yasra, quoted Rav Nachman Breslover. I went to not to a Hasidic yeshiva. Let's call it a Litvish yeshiva. Although the Rabbeim did not wear ties, as I recall. But the point is that one of my teachers, Shmuel David Vashavshik Zatzal, he learned in typical Lithuanian yeshivas in pre-Holocaust years, Baranovich, Kamenetz, etc. But he only shared with us one Hasidic saying. I learned with him for an entire year. And that was, Rav Nachman Breslover used to shout from the rooftops in Yiddish, Yidden, seid sich nicht miyayish. All right. Jews, don't despair. Don't give up. This is just going to drag you down. So Rav Soloveitchik is telling us that the Zohar HaKadosh says there's 10 levels of despair. 10 levels. You go deeper and deeper, and pretty soon you're paralyzed. You get down in the 8th, 9th level of despair, you can't move, you can't wake up in the morning, you can't smile, you can't think, you can't react, you can't do anything positive. But the good news is that there are 10 depths of spirituality, 10 depths of renewal, 10 depths of potential. And toward the end of this particular essay of his, he writes, the solution to all these depths is this prayer. Ribbonu Shalom, I'm praying to you, mi ma'amakim, from the depths. Whatever my circumstances are, and again, these days, we're all we can't help but go down to some depth. It's only natural, only right. But the solution to being stuck in the depths is this tefillah. Ribbonu Shalom, mi ma'amakim karasi, I'm calling you from these depths. I want to come up. Or go to the other channel of depths, which give me potential and power and koach and energy and creativity to do good, to do better. So that the sinner, it's not just the sinner who approaches God, but rather, mimamakim karasicha Hashem, in these words of Rav Soloveitchik, the saint within man reaches out to him, with a capital H, the incorruptible core of the human soul, submerged within the inner recesses and mysterious dimensions of the human personality, and unknown even to the sinner himself, has never been estranged from God. The primordial, pristine nucleus contained within each person's ma'amakim, within the depths of each of us, approaches God with confidence, with security. Rosh Hashanah is supposed to have a Su'udah, and some even argue there's a mitzvah of Simcha on Rosh Hashanah to some extent. It's not a day to be gloomy and desperate. It's a day to realize the depths within you that have the potential to do so much better. The phrase continues, Rav Soloveitchik, Mima'amakim kurosicho Hashem. To get down to these depths, I need your help, Ribbonu Shalom. I need your tzad lishmai. I can't do it myself. I can't do it with the best psychotherapist in the world or with the greatest spiritual advisor in the world. I need you, kurosicho. I'm calling upon you. Because I want the incorruptible and inextinguishable spark which God ignited in the subterranean recesses of each man's personality. This is the eloquence of Rav Soloveitchik. At the dawn of creation, is permitted to address God. The sinner continues in the same kapitel Tehillim, Hashem, Shema B'Koli, God, listen to my voice. Tihiyena aznecha kashuvos, may your ears listen l'kol tachanunoi, to my tachanunim, to my prayers, to my begging of you. Please, God, listen to my true and genuine inner voice, and not to the voice of my sinful pseudo-personality. Listen solely to the authentic me, to those depths of goodness, of tov, and not to the voice of my sinful pseudo-personality. Listen slowly to the authentic I. Do not heed the voice of the other portions of my depraved personality. So this is Rav Soloveitchik, and it's all about change mima'amakim, from the depths. It's not just one step at a time, we'll go slow, but it's rather a transformation, a transformation. There are many other ways to bring about a transformation. And many of them have to do with the way we act toward others in our families, in our social groups, and the way we react to each other. Because each of us has the power, each of us, no matter what our condition is, intellectually, physically, and health-wise, etc., we have a certain power. And the power can be phrased in simple English as opposed to Rav Soloveitchik's English, in simple English, it's giving a yasher koyach, that's simple English, to the other guy, to the other person. There are various stories I can use to support this, but one is told about Rabbi Isaac, they used to call him Rabbi Isaac Sher, who was the founding Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshiva Slabotka in Bnei Brak. He was from Slabotka in Lithuania. He escaped the Holocaust because he was on a fundraising mission in Switzerland. And then as soon as he could, he came to Eretz Yisrael and founded the yeshiva, which exists today in Bnei Brak, a continuation in some ways of the Slobodka yeshiva in pre-Holocaust times. So he was a mashgiach in this yeshiva, and he was part of the job of a good mashgiach. He walks around the base medrash to make sure that the bochrim are learning. They're not talking about, sports or the weather or who they're going out with on a shidduch date. None of these things. They're talking about the Gemara. So he walks around, and he sees these two fellas who are obviously not discussing the Gemara that they're supposed to be discussing, but they're talking to each other. So he goes over to them and says, what's happening? What are you talking about? Oh, we're talking about something very important. We're each talking about, suppose I had all the wealth of, you name it, Rothschild. I had all the wealth of Rothschild. And what would I do with it, with this money? Would I build a hospital for the ill? Would I build a yeshiva to learn Torah? Would I build? Would I find some very, very poor people who need bamish bread on the table? And would I give them money there? Where would I give all these millions and millions of dollars? Where would I do it? And my friend says, my chavrusa says, oh, I would do it to this and that. And the other one says, I would do it. No, I'd have priorities here. How would we spend Rothschild's money? So they said, so we're not really talking about, the shidduch date that we're going to have this weekend. And we're not talking about the sports. We're talking about something very important. What would be our priorities if we were millionaires? So he said to them, and I once heard one of the Bachrim, who was then much older, tell this story. He says, Rav Sherkama came over to us and he said to us, after hearing what we were talking about, he says, but you do have millions. You do have millions. And the difference between you and Rothschild is that if Rothschild gives away his millions, he has nothing left. But the millions that you have don't cost you anything, and they don't diminish because you've given them away. So they looked at him like, what do you mean? He said, you have the ability to give kavod to another person. You have the ability to tell a person who learned the Torah, shikayach, good job. You have the ability to tell any one of the teachers you're going to hear later this evening afterwards, very good, thank you very much, good job. You have the ability to tell other people how nicely they look, how much you enjoy their company, etc., etc. You can give honor, respect to everybody. It doesn't cost you a penny. In terms of time, it might cost you 5 seconds. Sever ponim yafos, smile at the other person, etc. Rashi in Maseches Brachos is a concept of gzelas ha'oni, stealing something from a poor person. So Rashi is bothered. How can you steal from a poor person? He doesn't have anything to steal. If you steal his dignity, that's gezelas. That's gezelas ha'oni. That's stealing from ha'oni. He has nothing to steal. He's dirt poor. But if you don't treat him with proper dignity, with proper respect, with takta kavod, he's a tzelem Elokim, he's a fellow Jew, or tzelem Elokim, a fellow human being. If you take away his dignity in any way, you ignore him, you call him a funny name, or whatever, no good. No good, that's gzelas oni. I tell a story. Rabbi Fein referred to me, because we were old friends, as Rabbi Hersh and Rabbi Weinreb. So there's a story behind my name Hersh. Some of you from Baltimore may know the story. I had this teacher who remains my favorite teacher. I had a lot of teachers over the years in yeshiva and graduate school and all sorts of circumstances. He was my favorite teacher. So I have one away candidate. His name was Rabbi Shmuel David Varshavchik. I had him when I was 19 years old, late teenage years. When we came into his class, he was just really, this is the early 1950s, and he had just been saved from the Holocaust, where he lost his entire family and most of his friends. And he was spared because he fled with the Mir Yeshiva to Shanghai. And then from Shanghai, they made their way, and he was in the United States, and he was a Rabbi in the yeshiva I went to, RJJ, Rabbeinu Yaakov Yosef, then on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And we came into his class the first day, and he asked us our names. He writes them down in his little book. And then over a couple of days, he sees how we interact to each other. So we interact each other by calling each other by our nicknames. In my class, there was a fellow named Pepsi. There was a fellow named Rocky. There was a fellow, most of my friends were Brooklyn Dodger fans, if you remember that far back when Dodgers were in Brooklyn. So they had a Duke. We had a Duke in the class, Duke Snyder. We had a Pee-wee in the class, Pee-wee Reese. And these are the names. I was kind of lucky because they just called me Hersh, and Hersh is also a kind of a nickname. It's a diminutive of Tzvi Hersh. So here's how we're talking to each other. So one day, it was a Friday, I remember, he bangs on the table and says, look, there's something bothering me, and I have to talk to you about it. What's bothering you, Rabbi? He says, I look around the room, and I see, you're calling each other Pepsi, Rocky, Duke, Pee-wee. I look at my book of who's in my class. I don't see those names. I see an Eliyahu, I see an Ephraim Fischel, I see a Tzvi Hersh, I see Avram David. I don't see these names. What are these names all about? So we all start bursting out laughing and whatever. And he says, this is no slight matter. This is a very serious matter. And he turns to each of us. There were about 20 fellows in the class. He went one by one. He gave each one a little zinger. The zinger he gave me was this. Und Tzvi Hersh. He said, big, of course, in Yiddish. He's sitting here, and you're all calling him Hersh. Amol vet sein a großer Rov. One day he will be a great rabbi. All right? That's what he said. I was 19. I wasn't even thinking about being a great rabbi. I was more concerned with making the basketball team. But he said, imagine, he's going to be a rabbi, and people are going to call him Hersh. Fußvater Nomen is Hersh. All right? And he had this way of saying a resh, the letter resh with like a guttural sound. So he would say, Rufen Tzvi Hersh. All right? That's what you have to call him. But the interesting thing is that it changed our behavior. It was improvement. We all tried, at least in his presence, not to call each other Pee-wee and Duke and Hersh. But it changed our self-concept. We started to think of ourselves not as Duke and Pee-wee and Jew, etc. We began to think of ourselves as an important person. Even 19-year-olds don't think that way usually. But he gave us that self-image. You are an important person. Imagine you're going to be whatever you're going to be, and you're going to be called Pepsi until you're 90. One of my friends still is called Pepsi, and he's approaching 90. But it had this effect of changing the personality. That's what Rav Sher meant. We have the ability to change a person by the way we relate to the person. We relate to him as a koach, as a gavra, as a person with talents and something to offer the world. Then the person becomes talented and becomes someone who offers to the world. What do we do for Teshuva at this particular year? Tavshin Pei Dalet Tichle Shana V'Kila Lo Seha, and Tavshin Pei Hey, that's coming up in a few days. Tochel Shana Bircho Seha. So, do we just try to improve, or do we try to change? I gave this a lot of thought. I've been giving it a lot of thought. I may not have come to my final conclusion, but I think I have an approach that I'd like to share with you. And this will at least come close to a conclusion for this evening. And that is a Gemara in Maseches Shabbos. Gemara in Maseches Shabbos Daf Yud speaks about something that in our circles you don't hear too much about. And that is the proper way to dress when you daven. Proper way to dress when you daven. The Gemara insists that you have to dress in a special way. One way is to have a belt, a gartel, and that's the source of the minhag in Chassidim, some non-Chassidim, to wear a gartel, a belt, when they pray, when they daven, at least when they daven Shemona Esrei. But the Gemara also talks about people who wore a special cloak when they davened, about people who wore a certain type of, those days they walked barefooted, but a certain type of stockings that would at least cover the bottom of their feet when they daven. The Gemara speaks about these details, and some details, so look it up at Daf Yud Amud Aleph. But the Gemara also says the following. Omer Rav Ashi, Chazinu lei Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi said, Rav Ashi was one of the last of the Amoraim, of the latest rabbis mentioned in the Talmud. And he observed a much older rabbi, Rav Kahana. He observed him. So Rav Ashi was a young yeshiva bocha, and he saw Rav Kahana. And he wanted to know, well, how does Rav Kahana dress when he davens? So it depended not upon the weather, but it depended upon what was going on in the world. Ki ikatsara b'alma, when there was pain in the world, tsar, all right now there's pain in the world. Shadi gelumei, he had a royal cloak, but when he davened, he cast off the cloak. He cast off his beautiful kapota, whatever he was wearing, cast it off. Because it was too gaudy, it was too shiny, too arrogant to wear when the whole world is in tsar, when our soldiers are fighting anti-Semitism, and on and on, and I don't have to go on and on with all the tsar that we have now. So he would daven in a different garment. Shadi Glumei, he cast off his cloak. Upocha Yodeh, and he would hold his hands like this in front of him, with fingers upon fingers, and clasped together in front of him, this posture. Umatzli, and then he would daven. And he would say, I'm davening now without my beautiful cloak, and with my hands in a position of lowliness, of servience, and because ka'avta kama moreh, right now I'm like a slave before God. The world is in such sorrows, I can't wear this fancy garment, I have to daven humbly, and kind of degrade myself before God. But ki'ika shalma, when there is shalom in the world and everything is hunky-dory, then lavish umiskaseh, he would take his cloak, put it on, and wear it proudly. Umisatef, and he would wrap himself in his talus over his head, and in that position, umatzli. And he would say, I'm not praying to God as a servile servant. I'm praying to God, Hikon likras Elokecha Yisrael. Prepare yourself for Elokecha Yisrael. So obviously, that's just one little passage from that whole sugya. But it's telling us that in prayer, we have to change. And we change by the clothes that we wear. All right? Clothes make the man. I don't know who said that, but clothes have a lot to do with who we are. And when we're davening, hopefully we're a little different than we are when we're playing touch football. So we dress differently. And depending upon what's happening in the world around us, if there's tsar, that tsar is going to be affected even in the way I dress when I daven. And if there's shalom in the world, alavai, tomorrow we would somehow find shalom all around. So then it's time to really dress up fancy, and the custom in the Hasidic world is with a special strimal, etc., to look royal, etc. That's when there's shalom. So it occurs to me that the same thing is true with tshuva. You can do tshuva in two ways, as we've been saying tonight. You can do tshuva step by step. It's a legitimate way. But maybe that's the way to do it when things are, quote, normal. And okay, so we have problems. Obviously, we all have problems in parnosa and health and this and that. But basically, we're okay. So we can do tshuva a step at a time. But when we're in the type of Eis Tzorah that we are in now, the type of Eis Tzorah that for sure hasn't come close to anything we experienced since the Holocaust, and some would say it certainly isn't Eis Tzorah, and it's a difficult time. It's an Eis Tsar. But maybe then that's the time when we have to do the more difficult but much more transformative type of thing. And that works in two ways. It works if, chas v'sholom, the battles and the wars and the losses, etc., continue with no end in sight. That certainly requires us to change in a better way, change in a different way, to change in how we react, how we visit the soldiers, and how we visit the graves of the soldiers who are buried in Hersh or wherever they are. And the time to do it is this time of year, when people go to the graves of loved ones, or even people they don't know, and ask them for mechila because we didn't treat them properly. Who can say? Very few people can say, I've treated the soldiers properly. All right, we've all, we have a way to go. We have to change in so many ways, the way we treat each other, where we treat the widows and the orphans, the people who are evacuated from close to 100,000 people, etc. What are we doing in a way that's not just merely taking one step toward them, which would be fine in ordinary times to help other people out, but now it's much more drastic, and the changes that are required in our simple behavior are more demanding and require transformation. That would be my proposal. I want to conclude with a passage from, of all places, the Haggadah Shel Pesach, with the commentary of Moshe Tzvi Neria, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. Rav Neria said an interesting thing. He said he's writing just after the Scuds, back in the early 1990s. So there were rockets falling south of Haifa. And Hashem Yishmerenu. And difficult times. The rockets were falling. And, who knows where things would go. And then suddenly, there was shalom, at least relative shalom. The rockets stopped flying. The Scuds did very little damage and hardly any serious injuries. So he says, when we came out of the dark rooms, the safe rooms, the miklatim, etc., there were two attitudes that we had. One was from the Haggadah Shel Pesach, Baruch Shomer Haftachaso LiYisrael. Baruch Hu. Baruch Hamakom Baruch Hu. Baruch Shomer Haftachaso LiYisrael Baruch Hu. And then, Keneged Arboa Bonim Dibra Torah. So that's something, Haggadah Shel Pesach. So he said, what bracha should we make at this time? We're coming out of the dark rooms. He called them the dark rooms, safe rooms. We come out into the light and into relative safety, into a relatively long-term safety, as it turned out. This goes back to, I think, 1991. So he said, there's 4 sons. 3 of them get it, the Chacham and the Tam, and the Asheni Hodei Lishol. At some level, they each get it. The Chacham is a Chacham. The Tam is a simpleton, but you get through to him too with the proper teaching. The Asheni Hodei Lishol is a boy who walks around saying, duh, what, you teach him something. And then there's the Rasha among us, within each of us, who doesn't really give a darn, is not impressed by anything. So Baruch Shomer Haftachas El Yisrael. We who are coming out of the Miklatim, we are coming in Yitz Hashem, Bekorov Mamish, Be'erafayim, to a real, true, lasting Shalom. We're going to have to make a bracha, and the bracha can be Baruch Shomer Haftachas El Yisrael. Rebbeinu Shalom promised us a geula shlema, etc. Baruch Hashem, we have something. But some of us don't get it. There's one Russia, 1/4 of the 4-member family who just doesn't get it, and he just doesn't get it. And for him, we say, "Nu Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu." Makom is a kind of a phrase that you refer to God, but God is kind of far away. And we ask, "Ayem Makom Kavodo." Where is he? Where is he? He's somewhere, but he's far away. That's the Russia. The rest of us are hopefully chachamim, tamim, or at least shoalim sheinam yodeim l'shaol, and we should be able to recite together b'mheira v'yomeinu mamosh, Baruch Shomer Haftachas LiYisrael. Thank you.